Hello, Iterative Marketers! Welcome to the Iterative Marketing Podcast, where each week we give marketers and entrepreneurs actionable ideas, techniques, and examples to improve your marketing results. If you want notes and links to the resources discussed on the show, sign up to get them emailed to you each week at iterativemarketing.net. There you'll also find the Iterative Marketing blog and our community LinkedIn group where you can share ideas and ask questions of your fellow iterative marketers. Now let's dive into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iterative Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Robinson, and with me, as always, is the intellectual and interesting Elizabeth Aaron. How are you doing today, Elizabeth?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Coming off a poker win last night.
Nice. Now, this is a weekly poker game, right?
No, monthly. I don't think I'd be allowed to go off and play weekly with the guys, but no, it's just a monthly guys poker night, very friendly tournament style, and it's just more or less an excuse to get the guys together, right?
Yes, it seems that when we become adults and have families that we need those excuses to get out of the house and stay in contact with those people in our lives.
That's very, very true, and a friendly game is a good excuse. So.
Even better when you win.
Absolutely. So what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about assets, specifically long-term assets.
And this is important because we as marketers have a tendency to really be focused on the money in and what are the short-term gains that we're getting out of it rather than what are we building up long-term, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, and it's sad that we avoid that because when we take a look at those long-term gains, when we take a look at those long-term assets, we really are adding some additional value to the organization. And we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the podcast, but it's really an opportunity for us to elevate our marketing game.
And specifically, we're going to go through three different types of long-term assets, and we're going to outline exactly what these are and how they do impact our long-term marketing success.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to dive into each one individually, content, brand, and data, and then talk about how they impact, like you said, the marketing efficiency and also how we can measure it, because that's a very important part that I want to make sure that we cover today.
And then the best part is these three things do not just work independently, they best work together. And so we'll explain the relationships between content, data, and brand, and how they really, to use the overused term, present some synergies, as they work together and enhance each other.
That's a really great point. I think before we dive in, can you put this into context for us? Because some of our listeners might have a hard time understanding why it's important to build long-term assets.
So we as marketers have a tendency to focus on the short-term gains that our marketing dollars are going to appreciate for us. So we invest in media, we invest in content. The idea is that media and that content is going to draw in a certain audience, and that audience will monetize themselves in the form of sales. And there might be a delay in when we put that money to work versus when the sales come in, but we expect that there's a ratio here. The more money we put in, the more sales we're going to get out. And that's true of some of our investments, but there's another class of investment that in the business world is called a capital expenditure or a capital investment that we as marketers generally overlook. And that's what we want to talk about today. If we relate this back to the rest of the business or another type of business, you can think about like a factory floor. And if you were to build a factory, you have to spend money on machinery and equipment. And the more money you spend in that machinery and equipment and automation and infrastructure, the more efficient your factory can become. So it's not like the raw materials that you're buying, which if you relate back to marketing would be like the media and the content that has short-term return. It is a long-term investment that's going to improve your profitability in converting those raw materials that is coming into your factory into the finished goods that come out the other side. When we relate this back to marketing, we're going to talk about three key classes of these long-term assets, these capital and investments or capital expenditures that we as marketers invest in. We put money into this pot so that we can improve our efficiency later. And those three areas are our brand, the content that we produce, specifically the evergreen content that we produce, as well as the data that we use to access our audiences, to to segment and target and reach the audiences that we want to get our content in front of.
So let's start with content, because, that's something that is, it's a hot topic. We're all producing content. And I think it's important to note, and you sort of alluded to this, is that not all content is created equal. We've got the content that has the sort of the short-term games, but that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about this as a long-term asset. Instead, we're talking about evergreen content that is going to be able to stand the test of time, is going to have a shelf life that extends beyond a very defined and short period.
And when we think about evergreen content, there's a lot of different things that come to mind. But for me, what comes to mind first is like that how-to content, the stuff that people are continuously referencing that's going to do well in search, that's going to come up in search results for people searching today, as well as people searching 6 months from now or a year from now, right?
Yeah, and I think giving an example of this, if you are a playing card company, you can offer an illustrated guide to poker hands or statistics on poker hands. And so this is something that not only are people going to be looking for now and 5 years from now, but even the same person could be coming back and accessing this reference material. And so again, it's evergreen, it's ongoing. It doesn't have a short defined life that it lives. You can keep using it over and over and over. And so that investment, it becomes spread over time.
I said I won poker last night. I don't need a reference card for that. But yeah, that's exactly right. And it's not just reference material that can be evergreen. There's other things that can be evergreen, certainly tools and utilities. Even some entertainment pieces can end up being evergreen. I think back like the Dollar Shave Club video that they've been running for how many years now and is still on their homepage. Still works for them because, well, it's that entertaining and it still defines their brand and it still draws people in and works.
Mm-hmm. So to be considered a long-term asset, content needs to be evergreen, but it also needs to generate revenue, whether that's directly or indirectly.
And by direct, we mean that it's the type of content that in and of itself will convert into a sale. So this could be persuasive content that has calls to action on it right there that can drive revenue immediately. But also it can be content that is indirectly driving revenue and that it's helping you build or segment your audience. We'll talk more about that on the data side, but content really is a huge driver in helping you identify who your audience is and establish a relationship with them, whether it's via email or paid media, as well as understand them and what they like and what they want. And those are indirect revenue drivers that still impact the bottom line. They just don't do it in that quick hit, call to action, convert into a sale right now sort of way.
So I think as we sort of wrap this up, I want to talk about how we measure content as an asset, because it's one thing to say that we have it, and I can sit here and tell you that I've got 56 pieces in my, sitting out there that I can use in different things, but is that really telling the whole story? Is volume of content the only thing that I have to measure this as a long-term asset?
Yeah, because ideally you're tracking these assets both for your own knowledge, but also to report up, because somebody's holding the purse strings to your marketing budget, and maybe it's you, but more likely it's somebody else, right? And so they want to know how you're spending your money. And so if you're spending your money on content and it's evergreen content that maybe is producing some marginal returns today, but will be a long-term asset for you, will continue to generate revenue long into the future, that's something you need to be able to communicate. And I think there's two metrics that help you do that in concert, and I don't think one alone does the job. And the first one is volume of content. How much stuff are you making? And volume alone doesn't mean anything. I can spit out thousands of 200-word snippets of gibberish, and it's not going to do a thing for our brand, but it'll be quick and dirty to produce. It's also the quality, and the quality can be measured in a couple of different ways, but the ones that we like to look at are things like engagement time, or whether or not it's driving new traffic to the site, and ultimately if it is more of a direct revenue type of piece, is it converting into revenue right there in the spot? You need to tie it back to some KPI that leads to revenue down the line, in addition to talking about how many pieces you've produced.
So I think that about wraps it up on the content side. So let's jump into the second long-term asset. And this is also a hot topic, and it's brand.
Yeah. So how would you, can you remind our listeners, Elizabeth, how we define brand here? Because I know that a lot of different people define brand in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about brand, we're talking about something that goes beyond logos and brand names. And instead, it becomes that emotional connection between you or between your company and your prospects. And this kind of ties back to the fact that we as individuals are not hardwired to make decisions about intangible things like companies. We want that emotional connection. We want to feel like we know you. 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was you were going down and you were making that connection with the local sales guy. Kind of given the advent of the internet and how businesses have changed and how we buy things now, that's not necessarily the case. And so our brand gives our prospects the chance to have that emotional connection with our company.
Yeah, to do business with those that we know, like, and trust, right? I mean, as to use the cliched term there. We're going to throw as many cliches into this podcast episode as we can. But that brand becomes an asset to you because it's a competitive advantage. It allows you to do things in more powerful ways in the future because you've established that threshold of trust. My favorite example of this is recently Tesla released the Model 3. And this was a long-awaited thing, but there's a lot of people who are in love with the Tesla brand, even though they don't own a Tesla and aren't able to be in the market for a Tesla. But when Tesla released the Model 3, because they had such a strong brand and they had developed such goodwill with their audiences, before they had even shown what this car looked like or released specs or anything else, they had 100,000 people who had put a down payment on the car. That's amazing. Could a no-name car company do that? Absolutely not. It is only through the Tesla brand that they were able to sell 100,000 of something that nobody had ever seen.
And that right there is the power of the brand. And that's why having a strong brand is not only a competitive advantage, but it helps to translate into long-term profitability.
Yeah, there was a great study that was done a few years back. I think it was in 2010. Credit Suisse had taken a look at the companies that were on, I forget if it was the Fortune 500 or one of the major lists of companies, and had taken a look at performance of which companies did well and which companies did poorly, and they had correlated that back to which companies had invested in their brand as one of their top line items of marketing and advertising expense. And what they came up with was that there was a very, very strong correlation, and the companies that put a strong investment in brand outperformed the companies that didn't by a factor of 3. And that's a pretty impressive statistic right there. And it just goes to show that it's an investment that it's hard to track immediate ROI on, but that has a long-term impact on your success in market.
And you said something interesting there. It's hard to track. It is hard to track because we're talking again about something that's intangible. But that doesn't mean that you can't track it. It just means you have to be a little bit creative in what we use to measure that. So when we're talking about measuring our brand, one sort of easy way to do that is through brand awareness, specifically how many people are aware that your brand exists. And there's a couple of different ways that can be done. From sort of a big budget perspective, you can go out and do formal market research, where you've got a third-party vendor going out and asking about your brand, both unaided and then also with some prompts and kind of finding out what people think and feel and how aware they are of what it is that who your brand is and what it represents. But for those companies out there that don't necessarily have that budget, which, it's a lot of us, there's sort of this hack that we use in AdWords that lets us find out what brand awareness is. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we do?
Sure. And it doesn't work for every company because you have to have a unique brand name. But if you have a unique brand name that you can plug into Google AdWords, you can bid on that keyword. And then by bidding, you get access to the raw data of exactly how many people have searched for your brand name. And if you think about it, nobody's going to search for a brand they don't know exists. So it can be an indicator of brand awareness, although probably more accurately an indicator of brand interest, but a great little proxy to know, hey, Am I letting people know that we exist? And do people care that we exist based on our brand name?
And I just want to make one little note. You said a unique brand name. Obviously, a lot of us have a unique brand name because we wouldn't have a company that necessarily shares a name with someone else, although that does happen occasionally across industries. But we're not just talking about other companies that you're competing with. And we have a client that we work with now, unfortunately, that has a very unique name within their industry, but it happens to share the name with a prophet in, I believe, South Africa, who's up to no good right now. And so, we have a little bit of trouble measuring their brand awareness and brand interest because this prophet, who's, again, up to no good, is wreaking havoc with our brand awareness measurements.
And then we have another client who their brand has a number of brand extensions associated with it. It's global. It's got it's applied to a lot of different products and areas outside of the group that we're working with. And so it's not really a good proxy to their brand awareness within their audience because it's the brand is applicable well outside of their audience, and a majority of the traffic that we would be measuring would be coming from there. So it's not perfect for every organization, but for a lot of smaller groups, it can be a very great little hack to get a finger on that pulse and a great way to report that up as you make an impact there.
And then another measurement that we can use with brand is brand alignment. And this is, I think, really important. Not saying that brand awareness isn't important, but specifically we're looking at how well your brand is aligned internally and externally, meaning, I know what my brand stands for, but what did my prospects and my customers think about my brand? And if the two come together, then we're in a good spot. But if the two are separate, then I've got some work to do. And so we use something called the brand vector process, which measures alignment between our customers and prospects, our senior management team, and then employees. And it sort of plots that all out. And we've talked about this in, I believe it was podcast 11, using our brand vectors to measure and align your brand. So I think that's a great one to go back and listen to, because this really is a really great tool to see where you have alignment and where you have some opportunities to, really focus in and help to try and change that message.
Yeah, the danger is if you invest a bunch of money in promoting a brand that's not in alignment, all you're going to end up doing is creating some bad experiences or some dissonance that'll end up hurting you more than it'll end up helping you in the long run. So it's a very important measurement along the same lines. I think this is a great point for us to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk about data as a component to your assets. And in the meantime, let's go talk about how we can help some people.
Before we continue, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask you iterative marketers a small but meaningful favor and ask that you give a few dollars to a charity that's important to one of our own. This week's charitable cause was sent in by Michael Kuwarski. Michael asks that you make a contribution to Heart Love Place, a nonprofit providing programming and services that empower, develop spiritual growth, and motivate to build a stronger community in the inner city of Milwaukee. Learn more at heartloveplace.org or visit the link in the show notes. If you would like to submit your cause for consideration for our next podcast, please visititerativemarketing.net/podcast and click the Share a Cause button. We love sharing causes that are important to you.
And we're back. So before the break, we talked about 2 of our 3 different types of assets that we want to be growing and measuring the growth of as we continue to get better at marketing, right? The first 2 were content and brand. And now we're going to talk about data. So what do we mean when we say data in the context of a marketing asset, Elizabeth?
Well, what we're talking about here is specifically audience data. And when we're taking a look at our audience data, it helps us do one of 2 things: either connect with our audience through targeting and permission marketing, or segmenting our audience so that we can get the right message to the right person at the right time, which is, one of, I think, our favorite things to say here.
And the data that we're building, we're putting that in one of 2 places. We're either going to put that in a database, like a CRM database or a marketing automation database, which helps us pull lists and direct email and do other segmentation and directing of marketing that way. Or we're going to store that data in third-party data audiences, and those are going to be usually housed on the marketing platform or the advertising platform that we're using to put them to work. So that could be Facebook custom audiences, it could be Twitter tailored audiences, it could be cookie pools or floodlight audiences or whatever in your display advertising. Regardless of where you're putting them, they're third-party data, and if you're a bigger brand, you might have a DMP that you can put that data into that's even better, because then you can do some really fancy slicing and dicing of it. Either way, the data is what we can put to work to get the message out to the right person at the right time.
Before we go much further, let's dive into each of those when we're talking about databases versus first-party data. So in terms of the data that's in our database, this could be data that's living either in our CRM or in our marketing automation system. And the key here is that either one of these, based on what it is that we're tracking, allows for some really robust segmentation along a number of different vectors. And this can be psychographics, persona targeting, persona segmentation. We could be segmenting based on interest or based on need. Or if you've done the customer journey work, we can segment on buyer's journey and what state what consideration state that they're in that specific journey as they move through their interactions with your brand.
And by having this database, by understanding where our prospects are in different segments and different needs and different states in the buyer's journey, we're now able to use that and put that to work in creating content that is personalized to those audience members, and then delivering that content, whether that's via email or via advertising, by targeting data from that CRM system.
And this is where I think it gets really, really fun. We can do some really cool stuff with this. But before we do that, we need to have permission or access to market them and market to them. And that typically comes in the forms of opt-in lists, newsletter signups, whether that's through email or in some cases even text messaging.
And it's having these opt-ins that is really one of your most valuable assets. If you aren't currently working to build an opt-in email or SMS database, it's something that you should probably look at building. Again, you're not going to get immediate returns on that investment. So if you're advertising saying sign up for our newsletter or opt in to receive our text messages or whatever that message may be, that doesn't immediately translate to revenue. But if you build that over time, it means you now have permission to get very intimately into that user's inbox or message stream in ways that not every marketer is allowed. And that one-to-one relationship can be monetized in the future over and over and over again through clever use of content and offers and other content that's going to put that to work.
And it's again, these are people that have opted in. These are people that have actively taken a step to sign up to receive your content. And so, and to let you talk to them and to market to them. And so it's a really great opportunity, but I think we also, want to be respectful of that and keep in mind that we have been given permission. And so we want to make sure that we're adding value as we do this. But again, they want our content. So this is a fantastic time to be in front of someone that is interested in what it is that you have to say.
Now, slightly less powerful from a intimacy standpoint, but certainly more powerful from a reach standpoint is your first-party data. And this is where you have the ability to take your paid media and really personalize it, segment it, and get the right message to that right person. And so here you want to be measuring measuring and focused on growing how many individual Facebook IDs or Twitter IDs or how many cookies you have inside of these different audience pools that you can reach out and touch on demand whenever you have a message appropriate for that particular audience. And the key is to grow them with quality data and continue to grow them and nurture them over time, which means keeping some messaging in front of them over time as well, because if you aren't doing anything to add people to these pools, then they will start to decay over time as cookies expire or as the lifespan of these audiences hits their end.
So that's on the first party audience side. When we're talking about our database, the way that we measure and report on that is the size of our opt-in lists, our ability to segment either the different segments we have available, the size of those segments, what percentage of our database is segmented, pretty much any way that we can splice that data and use that to send targeted messaging out. That's where we have interest. That's what we want to report on.
How does this stuff all tie together? What really aids the other as far as when you start mixing the benefits of these long-term assets together?
Well, here's the really cool thing is that they all work together to build each other up. And so when you're looking at content and brand and data, you've compared it before to sort of a three-legged stool. At any point, if you pull one of those legs out, the whole thing kind of falls apart. You really can't do one without the other. And so all three of them, content, brand, and data, are necessary when you're talking about building and sustaining these long-term assets.
Yeah, let's go through each one individually, starting with content. When you look at content really holds up your data by giving you the information you need to segment your audience and by giving the content that's going to bring people in to build up those cookie pools and those Facebook custom audiences and Twitter tailored audiences, right?
Mm-hmm. When we talk about brand, the power of our brand and the awareness of our brand makes our content trustworthy and appealing before it's even been put out. It's the type of thing that, when you see something that comes from one of your favorite brands, you're interested because you know what to expect from them and you know what it is that they're going to be delivering. And so it increases that readability or that chance of it being read.
Talk about data, it informs us and tells us exactly what content we need to be creating to really cater to our segments and personalize that content. And then it can also give us the means to distribute it through those opt-in lists and through those cookie pools. We now have the ability to get that content into those people's hands. So without data, content becomes sort of, neutered, for lack of a better term.
So when we look back on this episode and we, to kind of talk about what we hope that you take away, I think the big thing is that all three are important. Content, brand, and data are all important assets that we need to invest in if we want to have future growth.
And each one supports the other. So if you drop one, you're hurting the other two areas. And I think finally, the most important component here is make sure that you're measuring this and reporting it back up, because senior leadership often looks at marketing through the lens of the more money I put in, immediately the more sales I'm going to get out, and ignores the capital investment component to it. So if you're not reporting that back up, they're going to forget about the fact that some of your plays aren't short-term revenue grabbing plays. Some of your plays are long-term investment into assets that are going to continue to provide returns long into the future.
That's a great point. And we actually have a blog post that we wrote a few months ago about this that talks specifically about how your reports can help you accomplish what you need, and it addresses the long-term asset portion. So definitely check that out if you haven't had a chance to read it, and we'll link to it in the show notes.
I think that's a wrap. I want to thank everybody for their time today. And as always, until next time, onward and upward.
If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast directory. If you want notes and links to resources discussed on the show, sign up to get them emailed to you each week at iterative.marketing.net. There, you'll also find the Iterative Marketing blog and our community LinkedIn group where you can share ideas and ask questions of your fellow iterative marketers. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our username is @ITER8IVE. Or email us at podcast@iterative.marketing.net. The Iterative Marketing Podcast is a production of Brilliant Metrics, a consultancy helping brands and agencies rid the world of marketing waste. Our producer is Heather Ullman with transcription assistance from Emily Bechtel. Our music is by C-Stock Audio Music Production and Sound Design. You can check them out at seastockaudio.com. We'll see you next week. Until then, onward and upward.